Michael, hey, thank you for joining the show. Greatly appreciated. You've been all over X-Land lately, just giving us all the scoops. And, I just got to say, you're doing a great job, man. You're all over the place. You're just trying to help out the people, and that's what I like. I'm always for the people. And but Michael, man, tell us about yourself. Kind of how did you get into all of this? Where did your baseball fandom start? Give us the rundown. Who the heck are you? How did this all happen for you? And just give us the story. What are you thinking?
Sure. Well, first, thank you for having me. Obviously, I appreciate it.
Of course.
Give you a little bit about rundown of me. Been on Twitter now for several years. Really got into reporting more recently. Kind of grew up in around people in baseball, whether that be media, kind of friends and family who know, other friends and family who are involved in ownership. And so kind of I've always been around the game, played it myself, always loved baseball. And so really I was blessed to know people who know more than myself. And that kind of started the love for reporting, and really just been trying to meet as many people as I can, form as many connections as I can, and go from there. So love what I do. Looking forward to continuing doing it for the rest of the off season, but it's really just a start.
Yeah, man. And also, I just wanted to say congrats. You just recently passed the 10,000 follower mark. As we can see here, you're already up to 11.5K. Hey, how have you been feeling just about the growth on Twitter? What has that been like for you?
I'm blessed, and I'm grateful for everyone who has supported what I do, and it really it's a credit to them, but obviously excited. Always want people to see what I do, proud of what I do. But yeah, it's exciting time, and
Oh, yeah.
who isn't excited, right? It's baseball off season time. Everyone wants to get their guys, and I'm the one to help you figure out who you're getting.
Yeah, people are counting on you to give them the good news, and then you got the people out there like, who the heck is this guy? Does he got any sources? I don't know. But you have been doing a great job. You've been just putting a lot of stuff out there, and I got to ask you, over your time, dropping stuff, right? What are some memorable stories that you have, dropped for the fans out there?
Sure. And so few come to mind. I remember I was texting with the Rockies,
Ooh,
someone with the Rockies, and
everyone
they
loves the
told
Rockies.
me everyone loves the Rockies. Well, at the time, no one loved the Rockies because they sucked. It was during the middle of the season, um, and he said, "Hey, I think we're close to a trade here." Believe they had like just gotten the Angels had just gotten Eduardo Escobar, and
Ah,
so like they had a big third base hole because Rendon was hurt, and they said Angels were giving him Mustakas, and I was like, "Oh, okay." Well, like what's kind of the return here, and they gave me the whole return. I ran it, and boom, kind of the whole world found out a few hours later.
yeah.
I've had kind of some random ones mixed in. Chad Green signing with the Blue Jays, and like a Mets front office kind of remodeling, so to speak. So, um,
Yes.
really, I've been all over the place. A bunch of ones come to mind, but yeah, no, those are just a few that I
All right. Well,
come to mind
one day if you
close
want
spot.
people to, kind of like how they do with Jeff Pass and they call it the passing bombs, if you want the Marino bombs one day, you're eventually, you're going to have to do all those little ones along the way. So, you know,
Exactly.
but yeah, who are some
Totally.
guys? I wanted to also ask you this too. Who are some other, MLB reporters that you look up to? Does anyone come to mind for you?
Totally. Passon is one. He does a great job. Kind of goes without saying.
Mhm.
But really, I mean, Ken Rosenthal is unbelievable. Joel
Mhm.
Sherman is fantastic. Robert Murray is great at what he does. Um, Andy Martino, I mean, he's on the money with Mets and has only gotten better with time. Like,
Yeah.
these guys are really talented, and there's a lot of guys in the industry to look up to for sure.
Oh yeah. Well, let's kind of get on with it here. I believe you're a bit, you're a
Go
big
for
Mets
it.
fan. You're a big Mets fan, and I'm guessing you've been a Mets fan as long as I have been a Red Sox fan. Just lifelong. With the Mets, let's kind of dive in here. The Mets did make a couple of moves yesterday, bringing in guys like Luis Severino, bringing Joey Wendell. With the Mets, what are you kind of thinking here? Because we've had a bit of back and forth among not just Mets fans, but baseball fans in general. The Mets are always a lightning rod of an organization, no matter who owns the team, no matter who's managing the team, no matter what players are on the team. They're always a topic of discussion. With this offseason, it feels a little different just because they really dropped the big bucks the last couple of off seasons. And this offseason, after a failed season last year, after spending just all the money in the world, it feels like they're going to be taking a different approach. What do you think here? Based off of just, yourself liking the Mets all your life and also maybe things that you've been hearing, how do you feel really when it comes down to what the Mets are trying to do this offseason, right? Like we've had people going back and forth. They're going to drop the big bucks. They're going to be maybe a little bit more conservative when it comes to the spending. Where are you kind of leaning here? Not just what you want them to do, but what you think they'll do.
Absolutely. I mean, I think they're trying to be more strategic than they have been in years past. They have 10 open spots on their 40-man. You look at how they tackled their off seasons the past 2 years, and I would almost describe it as like big Band-Aids on big problems. And it's like, hey, we need a starter. All right, let's sign the 40-year-old who's a Cy Young contender almost every year, and let's do that in back-to-back years. Yeah. Well, that got them to 101 wins, and like when they were peaking, it was great. Like everyone was happy. This is great. Yeah. But then, they fall short in the wild card, and then the next year, it's like, the age almost catches up to them. And so when they hired David Stearns, it kind of was a clear path change that they want to win in 2024. I mean, let's not forget that. They want to at least be, my understanding, I don't think they're going to be a top 3 to 5 team when you look at the Vegas odds and who's going to win the World Series. But, they're not going to be a joke. I mean, they want major league players. And so it's going to be strategic where if they have a hole and they believe there's that high-end free agent that they really like, they're going to be aggressive to get him, but they're not going to give someone unworthy money just to fix their holes. That's where you look at guys like Luis Severino, where they're hoping on a 1-year bounce back. If it works, it works, and then you get a qualifying offer and you reap the benefits of all that. If it doesn't, well, all right, we're back to the drawing board, and maybe next year there's another starter that pops up that you like long-term, where this cycle you didn't like him so much. And so they're trying to play this out long-term, win now, but really win more later. And that's kind of how they're approaching this all.
Yeah, and, looking at the Severino move, I did a video a couple weeks ago giving one player for each team that they should sign. When I thought of Luis Severino, I thought Brewers, right? Because I'm thinking Brewers over the last few years, obviously with the Brewers, they tend to not drop the big bucks very often. So totally. I thought, okay, Severino kind of fits in, I would think, like a 1-year deal. I was thinking maybe even around like $15 million or so. But I've also thought about just how they've been able to get, some pitchers back on track. But my potato brain kind of forgot that not really forgot, but, I'm thinking of how they were with David Stearns, right? And now David Stearns with the Mets. So when I saw him sign with the Mets, I'm like, oh, you know what? Maybe I was onto something a little bit. But with the Severino move, that I think could end up being, I think honestly, when you use the word strategic, right? That move, I think in itself is very strategic because I think there's a lot of good outcomes from that. If he does great for you, great. Maybe you can look into an extension. If he doesn't, well, okay. At least you tried. Or let's say he does good. Maybe the Mets are completely out of it at the deadline. There could be the possibility maybe you could deal him with teams looking for starting pitching. There's a whole bunch of different avenues you could go. And I think that's the beauty of bringing in David Stearns is because he can see, many different possible outcomes for things. Is that kind of how you feel about David Stearns personally?
Totally. I mean, I think if you ask him, what are you looking for in any player? value is what comes to mind. He's by nature a bargain hunter, and he
Right.
had to be when he was with Milwaukee. They're
Mhm.
always needing those bargains to stay competitive. And I don't, now he has the money. That doesn't mean he doesn't like a good deal,
Yeah.
and that's where, right, you're forming a 40 man. You can't, not every guy is going to be the most expensive player at his position.
Yeah.
And you look at kind of some of these more analytical clubs, and you sense some patterns. Some of them have maybe cheaper defensive center fielders, and
Yeah.
some of them are spending more money on the starting rotation. These are trends that he keeps track of, and these are things he's going to try to implement to the team with, he knows he's got all the money he wants, but you still want to be strategic in how you spend that, because if a great opportunity comes up and you spend all your resources at the beginning of the season and now you're not flexible at the deadline, well, that's a failure of the front office. And so they're trying to be strategic of how they use that money, but they still want to use it. It's
Yeah.
just, hey, how can we use this money in the smartest ways possible?
Right, and I think that's been a bit of a misconception with Steve Cohen a little bit. When obviously Steve Cohen, with all the money he has, people think, and yes, they have spent some big bucks the last couple of off seasons, but I think people think with Steve Cohen, he's just going to go out there and tell whoever's running things, spend this, spend this, spend this. I always tell people on my streams, do you think Steve Cohen got to where he was, with the amount of money that he has made over his life by just dropping cash left and right? No, there's strategy along the way. I'm 100% sure that he has utilized himself to get to the point of where he is financially. It's not just about spending massive amounts of money all the time, right? And that's why I love the move for David Stearns. I think that's a great partnership. Cohen leading the way, as the owner of the organization, but having a guy like Stearns who can think outside the box, right? Because Cohen himself, many times, I guarantee, has had to think outside the box. So,
Absolutely.
But with the Mets, there is one name that has been coming up with the Mets in reports, as well as just all the Mets fans out there. And that is Yoshinobu Yamamoto. And hey, listen, excuse my giraffe neck Robbie, but I think he's a perfect fit for the Red Sox. I'm just saying. But when it comes to Yamamoto, with, maybe things that you have heard out there, and obviously, being the big Mets fan that you are, what are your thoughts on Yamamoto as a fit for the Mets? Is it as realistic as Mets fans are hoping for it to be? Or is it more wishful thinking? Or do you think this is actually something that could happen for the Mets?
I'll start with the player. I mean, he's a great player, and
Mm-hmm.
and so you're talking about him, and I've been following him now for roughly 6 months. He popped up on my radar about 6 months ago, and talking with someone who's pretty well known in the industry, and I said, "Tell me about this guy. Is he better than Senga?" And he's like, "He's better than Senga." And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
"Really? Tell me about him." He's like, "He throws 100. I mean, he's 5'10. He really can throw it in there, and he's not a big dude, and that's what's
Yeah.
kind of crazy about him. He's got an unbelievable curveball and
Yep.
a forkball to pair along with it. And,
Yep.
and when you've got 3+ pitches, you're probably going to have something cooking. And
Mm-hmm.
what I'll tell you is, a lot of these teams, you're going to have to load up the Brinks truck, and that's where, you see online, you're scrolling through Twitter, and it's like, the Red Sox need Yamamoto, and it's like everyone is saying their team needs him.
Right.
Well, you're going to have a lot of unhappy campers when literally everyone and their fans
Yep.
are saying the exact same thing.
Yep.
Now, here's what I'll tell you about his market. I had one say to me when I asked kind of for rough numbers a few months ago, is like, don't be surprised if it gets to 200. And I put it out there and like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
this could start with a 2.
Oh yeah.
About 2 days ago, I had a call, and they said, hey, this could go over 250. And so now we're talking
Crazy.
about one of the highest paid pitchers in baseball. He's never played an MLB
Yeah.
inning,
Yeah.
right? And so it's a whole different ball game. And speaking to someone who I know, who had a conversation with people tied to Mets ownership, they said what would the intrigue be for a guy like Yamamoto? And ownership said something along the lines of, I'm a sucker for a good deal. Well, I'm afraid there might not be much of a great deal here when we're talking about one of the highest paid pitchers in baseball. And so that's what we're talking about here. This is a guy who's going to get paid his worth. You have multiple teams interested. The Yankees are very interested. The Mets are very interested. And the Dodgers are very interested. They want to sort out this Ohtani thing, which will resolve itself before Yamamoto. But, they've saved along all this money for Ohtani. What happens if Ohtani goes to the Cubs? If he goes to the Blue Jays, the Angels? Well, now they have this boatload of money, and they got nothing to spend it on. He's going to be their first call, and that's something the Mets are conscious of. So there's just a lot of competition. It's hard to pinpoint that final destination, and a lot of it depends on Ohtani, and that's going to be a big key here.
I agree.
To kind of sort it all out.
Yeah, and it's funny with the timelines of those two because we're hearing we'll get to Ohtani in a little bit, but with Ohtani, the reports out there have suggested he wants to get signed before the winter meetings, and last time I checked, that's in a few days. And with Yamamoto, we're hearing later on, maybe even somewhere late December, who knows, maybe even early January, maybe it could even get to that point. I gotta ask, with Yamamoto, have you heard anything about any preferences that, and not really geographically, but when I think of players that are coming over from Japan, obviously the money is, gonna be there, right? It's, to me, sure, with Yamamoto, it's a little different than Ohtani. I think Ohtani is pretty, even though it's gonna be a massive amount of money, I think it's pretty straightforward with Ohtani. I feel like it's more with him, obviously money, yes, but just the fit in itself, right? Where they are competitively, how they are with managing their players, longevity, health, and everything. I think those factors are going to come into play with Ohtani. But with Yamamoto, are you hearing of any any expectations that maybe he's looking for, or any preferences that he's looking for besides geographically, or has that been pretty hush-hush?
No, and so I've kind of asked around. About 2 weeks ago, there's a rumor floating around that he was leaning, his preference, if all money was the same, was West Coast. Actually had a call today where I said, shoot me straight, is this legit? And I was told absolutely not. Yeah. There might even be a preference to go to the East Coast. And so I'm not going to take that away as a legitimate conclusion. It sounds like, whoever the high bidder is going to land Yamamoto. I mean, we could say it all we want. I have heard, and it's something that's out there, like, from what he's heard, there's value in being a New York Yankee or a Los Angeles Dodger. Like, those are two classic organizations with rich histories, and that's something he's aware of and is intrigued about. But I'll be the one to tell you, if the Mets offer $30 million more than everyone else, he's a New York Met. Like that's how this is going to come down to, and that's what I was told today. Like, the high bidder will be the one to win it. And if you give him an offer that wows him, there's a pretty good chance he just landed him. And so, I haven't been told any specific preferences. I know that, maybe the Mets kind of have to pay some type of tax to leap the Dodgers or the Yankees. That's not impossible. But the high bidder here, in terms of probabilistically speaking, is going to be the winner.
Yeah, that's kind of the feeling that I get, whereas Ohtani, it feels more like almost like a feel kind of a thing, right? Because you already know the money's going to be there. Where with Yamamoto, yeah, sure, there's probably maybe some little things that could come into play, but I do feel like money is the driving force with Yamamoto at the end of the day. We'll just have to wait and see what ends up happening with him. Obviously, like you said, there's a ton of great fits, right? Have you heard of anything about maybe how teams could be preparing pitches for him? Like, do you think, yes, money is the driving force, but let's say for example, the Mets, I'll just throw a stupid number out there. Let's say the Mets end up offering like 280, but let's say maybe the Yankees or the Red Sox, maybe they're coming in right around the same. Have you heard of anything when it comes to presentation wise for teams that maybe that could end up swaying him at all?
And that's a great question. And so what I was told was the winter meetings and kind of shortly after, his timetable is pretty clear in that it's not now. He's eyeing mid-December at the absolute earliest in terms of when he plans to sign. So like you said, it could leak into January, maybe late December. But teams know they're going to have to wait this one out. This is not like a quick answer. And so around the winter meetings, maybe shortly after, there's Zoom scheduled with the teams and his agent, his representation and himself, where they're going to kind of tell him what their values are, give them that slideshow, that pamphlet, that presentation about this is what we are, this is what Mets, Red Sox, Dodgers, Yankees baseball is, and here's why you need to be a insert team. And so they're pitching themselves to him, over the next week. That's kind of what we're going to see here. And I'll give you just kind of teams to look out for. The Yankees are in hard. The Dodgers are in hard. The Mets are in hard. And your Boston Red Sox, they're in as well. And so he's got a rich market here. There's other teams that are in that, I'm not really able to speak on, but he's got a rich market here. There's a lot of suitors, and the money's going to be, it might wow some folks when it's all said and done.
Yeah, pitching-wise, when it comes to these pitchers from Japan, the big two really that we've seen over the last, 20 years or so, we saw Tanaka with the Yankees and we saw Daisuke, right? Tanaka, I remember there was a lot of hype behind him, but good grief, the hype behind Daisuke when he first came over, because we hadn't really seen someone at his level come over. We had seen some guys come over to the majors, but
Sure.
Daisuke was looked at like he was a legend, right, over in Japan,
Right.
and he was still like only 26 years old at the time. That's what kind of gives me like, hope as a Red Sox fan that, Daisuke with him, he still, speaks highly of the Red Sox and had a good experience there. Despite not really having a lot of great years, he said they handled him very well. And I just wonder, who knows how much of an impact that could have, or if he even ends up talking to Yamamoto about it. I don't know. But the Red Sox, do you think, I wanted to ask you, just this one, do you think because we've seen the reports about, playing with other players from Japan, and, I've always thought that's kind of like I don't want to call it like a lazy sort of a thing, but I just feel like people are just trying to grasp at straws almost a little bit. But with Yamamoto, obviously, and there is a report out there from Rosenthal from a little while back that players tend not to want to play with each other, players from Japan, just because of the hierarchy thing, out of respect. And we've heard with Yamamoto that he's okay with it. Have you heard anything else, any extra stuff about that kind of stuff, or is that really not that big of a deal?
No, and I heard exactly that. Like, I think there was maybe some tweets that blew up that said like he's looking to play with other Japanese players.
Right, and that was a mistranslation.
A mistranslation, right? So he is totally on board with playing with other Japanese players, right? Yeah. The Mets have Kodai Senga, right? With the Red Sox, they have Yoshida, and so like there's different. I don't know if any of them are necessarily a pull. Like I said, like it's probably just going to come down to the money, and once that sorts itself out, like he will have his spot. But I haven't really heard that one way or the other it's a driving force for where he's going to end up. I think teams want to make sure their pitch to him is really strong. And like they have accepting communities, and like these are all going to be things that they're pitching to them, pitching to him when they really tell him like, hey, we want you. And so that's where they're at right now. But yeah, it's it totally could be a part of the pie. And we'll have to see how it shakes out.
It's gonna be crazy times, man. It's gonna be crazy times. Who knows what happens this week? Who knows what happens late December? Who knows? We could have Yamamoto on Christmas, for crying out loud.
Totally.
But let's move on to another pitcher that's also on the market, except he's on the trade market, and that is a man by the name of Dylan Cease. Now, John Morosi, he put out yesterday that talks have intensified in the last 48 hours, and some people close to the negotiations believe a deal before the winter meetings is increasingly possible. And he also lists here the hometown Braves are the finalists, and there was a report from Rosenthal as well saying that Chris Getz is telling clubs he likely will wait to move Dylan Cease until after the top free agent starting pitchers sign, according to Major League sources briefed on the discussions. My immediate reaction to that just sounds like leverage to me. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not, the guy out here with all the scoops, but that just kind of, just based off of, because it's very conflicting with what we've been hearing about him this past week, where it's like, it feels like it's almost hitting a climax, and then all of a sudden he's going to wait until after the top guys sign. Well, we just talked about Yamamoto. He might not even sign until January. It's like, what, are you going to wait till then after all these, intense talks? So that to me sounds like leverage. I could be wrong. What are your thoughts on the Dylan Cease market right now? Anything you're hearing? What are you thinking?
Yeah, and so I had that Morosi tweet, sent it to people I know, and said, like, is this legit? And I heard back, like, it's definitely getting more intense. Like, there is something to that is true. When we're talking about leverage, it's hard to determine what that leverage is because, signing after or being traded after all the pitchers go, there's value in that too.
Yeah.
And there's added leverage in waiting. And so they're going to try to determine really where their leverage is. You have teams like the Mets who are wary of being the last ones at the table who never got their bite of what they wanted. And so that's where, when you're talking about Yamamoto, no one wants to be the team to bank all in that Yamamoto is their guy with two other teams that are doing the same thing, because two of those three are not going to be the ones to get him. And that's where they're going to be strategic in making sure they have alternative plans. Now, here's what I'll tell you in terms of suitors. The Atlanta Braves are a legitimate suitor for Dylan Cease.
Oh, yeah.
And people like to talk about how, hey, they might not have the farm that other teams have. Like, I was told they are in here. They are looking hard. Interesting enough, like, this is the third option that has been on their radar. What I was told was Nola and Sonny Gray were actually their top two options. They struck out on 1 and 2, and now they're on 3. And you don't want to start making your way further down that list. On it, I would say Eduardo Rodriguez is someone else to watch it if Cease kind of falls apart here. The Braves are a team to watch for Cease. The Dodgers out there, they're a team to watch for Cease. The Mets, not a team to watch for Cease. I just don't think they're trying to give out prospects. And I know from conversations with people in Tampa that the Mets have not been ones to call on Glass now. So I would assume it's probably more of the same with Cease. But yeah, I mean, widespread interest around the league.
Yeah, and the Cease market, I mean, that's obviously going to affect the Glasnow market as well. It seems like Dylan Cease, that's option number 1. And then if you miss on him, well, then Glasnow would be the next one, I would think. And getting back to the leverage thing, it kind of makes me, I don't know, maybe I'm just trying to come up with an answer in my head. I guess what the reaction that I had to this little tidbit was maybe they were getting somewhere. Right? I mean, let's say the Braves, I'll just use them. Let's say maybe they were talking names, swapping back and forth. Maybe the Braves are a little hesitant about giving up one name in particular, and now the White Sox are like, all right, we're going to wait. So maybe they're trying to get the Braves, I'm just using it as an example, to maybe fold a little bit and give up a guy, right? Do you think maybe it could be that, or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, and there's two things I want to talk about here. The first one is, like, they were in deep talks with the Orioles at the deadline for Cease, and they held strong. And I think if you ask them now, that was quite a mistake. I think his value has dropped a good amount from then with a relatively rocky second half with the White Sox. But they held firm. Like they knew what his value was. Now, obviously, it's a little different, but I still think they're adamant. Like, there is value there. and for sure it's a fire sale, but that doesn't mean the Braves have to get him. Like, there's multiple other teams that would be interested.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
And so that's where they're feeling the market. Now, the other thing is, like, they've already had a trade this offseason. Aaron Bummer went to the Braves. You had Schuster and a few others in the return. So they've already talked this offseason. They've definitely already talked about Dylan Cease. And so those conversations have probably been going on for weeks now. Mm-hmm. And, maybe there's a little bit more smoke now. That could be the buzz. And it sounded like, there was more buzz there. But, I'm not necessarily sure. I wouldn't bank on him going in the coming days or at the winter meetings. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if Yamamoto holds up the whole market and there's kind of this question mark about, like, why aren't the guys going? And then suddenly you start to see Cease linger and Glass now linger. Like, these are things that happen. Especially with the starting pitching market, they bank off of each other. And it's kind of a totally reactive market. And so I think he's trying to play the market the best way he can. Yeah. And maybe not right now is the best time to kind of cash in on a prospect return for Dylan Cease. And that's what we're going to kind of see sort out over the next coming days and weeks.
Right. And I think what this says, if we are focusing on the Braves, because we've heard their name more the last couple of days at least. We've heard the Dodgers as well. They're very aggressive. I think what this says is that the Braves are absolutely looking to make some kind of a move. They're very motivated to make a move, and especially after the early playoff exit this past year. So, yeah, Dylan Cease could be interesting. And we also had a report here about the Cardinals, right? And the Cardinals are still showing some interest in Dylan Cease. Now, after they signed Sonny Gray, it seemed like maybe they were going to kind of back off a little bit, but it looks like, now that it seems like maybe the White Sox are going to perhaps wait a little bit, at least according to Rosenthal, maybe now this gave the Cardinals a bit of an opening to maybe jump back in and be like, hey, what's going on? What's happening here, right? Right. Do you think the Cardinals, I know it's really hard to say, but do you think there could be, especially after it seemed like maybe we were getting close to something, do you think the Cardinals could have a legitimate chance here to land Dylan Cease?
Here's what I'll tell you about the Cardinals. I know they are involved in the starting pitching trade market. Heard it from teams that have those arms, that they have been in talks with them to try to acquire those guys. It's a very desolate rotation at this point. Now that you've added Sonny Gray, you've added Lance Lynn, you've added Kyle Gibson. Like, they have bodies now. They didn't have that before. They lost Montgomery. And obviously, they traded away Flaherty. Wainwright, is like 80 million years old. And so, like, they know the problems they have. They're trying to be aggressive in solving those. But here's what I'll tell you. Like, they are definitely very involved in the trade market. I reported about Steven Matz. Like, I know for one of these teams that they were talking to, in this potential deal where they would acquire a starting pitcher, Steven Matz was actually directly involved in that trade that would have been going in the return. And so I think they're open to kind of switching up the rotation. They know change is needed. And if they can land one of these premier kind of rental arms, maybe give up a prospect or two, like, they're going to be in on that. And this is something that they've been monitoring. So, I think they're looking to still be aggressive. Like, they have their foot on the pedal, and they're not taking it off just because they got Sonny Gray. If there's an opportunity that arises, they're going to be right there for it.
Yeah, and and this is another team here. We talked about the Braves being motivated. Look at the Cardinals. Look at all the expectations they had coming into this past year, and they just fell flat on their face. So to me, I saw the Cardinals easily as one of the most motivated teams this offseason. People scoffed at the moves that they made with Lance Lynn, bringing in Kyle Gibson. To me, those are innings eaters, and I think that it's a nice base for the rotation. But even after Sonny Gray, it feels like maybe you could use a little extra, a little something. I think they could go into the year with the rotation that they have. But there's definitely, I think, room for improvement. We've seen Cardinals rotations over the years, they don't even look all that great, and they end up doing okay, right? Sure, they've had guys like, Chris Carpenter, Adam Wainwright over the years. But there's been a lot of Cardinals rotations that haven't really looked all that amazing. But I like that they're trying to do something different, right? So we'll have to wait and see what happens here with Dylan Cease. We'll have to see. But we do have another guy that is on the trade market, and he goes by the name, and you actually talked about this yesterday, and he goes by the name of Randy Arozarena, and this was a report yesterday from Jack, MLB Nerds, if you're not familiar. He had tweeted, "Big news regarding the outfielder market. The Rays are shopping outfielder Randy Arozarena, and there's a good chance that he is moved." And then you retweeted saying, "Can confirm." Well, Jack is reporting here. There's been buzz, and it's going to be a huge get for whoever lands him. My immediate reaction to this, right, if you're wondering what I thought, when I saw that tweet and then I saw you retweet it, I'm thinking, why the heck would the Rays want to trade Randy Arozarena? He's such a marketable player for them. I mean, who knows what even happens with Wander Franco next year? Even if they have Wander Franco next year, is that really, based off of what's happened with him over the last few months or so, like slapping him on billboards? They may probably want to lay low with him for a little while. Who knows what happens with him? But Arozarena is clearly the most marketable guy for them. But then I thought, okay, all right. I took a bite out of a sandwich and I thought, all right, you know what? This makes sense because it is the Rays, right? They've made moves like this. They make surprising moves. And with Arozarena, his value is still pretty high, right? And when you're looking at Arozarena, sure, wasn't as great in the second half last year, but that's a guy that you can just insert into your lineup. He's going to bring energy to your lineup. He's just going to bring a good personality to your team. He can, be a fan favorite anywhere he goes. Look what he was doing in the World Baseball Classic last year, doing the arm cross there with the Rays all year. He's a fan favorite. So to me, I could see teams loving to have Randy Arozarena, and it makes sense the more I thought about it, because when you look at the Rays, they have a couple of prospects coming up. You have Curtis Mead. You got Caminero coming up, two righty bats that are looking to be pretty good. So I could see the Rays being like, hey, you know what? We got guys coming up here. He's got a pretty good value right now, and we could use some pitching, right? And you look at the Rays, there's definitely a lot to be desired here when it comes to the pitching market, the pitching for them, and especially if Glasnow is on the market. Right? I mean, they could use some more starting pitching, in my opinion. And I think there's a lot of teams out there that you could maybe work in some pitching for them, some major league pitching for them. So I just rambled on a lot there. What are your thoughts when you retweeted this? Well, let me ask you this. When you heard the initial news, what did you think automatically? Did you have a similar reaction to me, or did you maybe think something different?
I mean, I'll take you back to a month ago. Talking to someone kind of in the know with all things baseball. He's about as good as it gets. And asked him, kind of take me through your notebook. What do you hear? And, that's kind of how this goes, is you exchange what you have. And so he said the Rays are going to blow this thing up. And, they can't afford this payroll, and they're trying to get ahead. This is what the Rays do. They cash in with years of control left. They don't like to wait till, ideally, he's a rental. In their mind, they would rather have 2-3 years of control, get some huge return back. And look at what the Rays do. We know what they do when they get these massive hauls. They cash in. So that's where they're trying to be strategic here. They want to get ahead of paying him. They know they're the Tampa Bay Rays. When this guy is about to get paid, they're going to trade him, at that point, or just let him walk. And so they're going to try to be strategic here, get ahead of it. With a few years left to control, you might get a batch of prospects that you absolutely love, and they want to cash in while the value's high. And so that's where they're at. And with Glass, they just can't afford him. I mean, $25 million, they've got to be totally sweating at that number. It's the Tampa Bay Rays, for crying out loud. So these are things they're trying to work that payroll down, stay competitive, and they are comfortable that they have the right guys in place to identify young talent with some of these prospects to where they think they can get back, good controllable assets will help them down the line.
Yeah. And with Randy Arozarena, I was kind of looking last night, like what could be some good fits for Randy Arozarena. I came up with a few teams. I thought, well, right off the bat, the Dodgers, they're always going to be in the mix, right? But the Dodgers really could use another bat in there, like another outfielder, right? You got Chris Taylor projected to be the left fielder for next year. One fun team that came to my mind were the Marlins, right? Stay in Florida. And the Marlins, they got, I think, some young pieces that they could send back in a deal that maybe could intrigue the Rays. Who knows what the Rays are thinking when it comes to what they're looking for in a player. You got plenty, like the Mariners could use something. Who knows? Maybe even the Mets, right? The Mets, that could be a cheap ad for them. That's not really, but you'd have to give up prospects, so I'm not sure if the Mets would want to do that after adding prospects. So I got to ask, what are you thinking when it comes to teams? Have you heard any specific teams? What do you think?
This is something that, I had a few phone calls last night, and I'm not really at liberty to speak on it, but I'll kind of give you a more broad view. They're definitely in the early stages here.
Yeah.
Only a few teams have kind of engaged in terms of like finding out what that price is, but they sensed more of a willingness than they expected in terms of like, hey, they actually are motivated to get this guy out because they know the value he has, and how some of these teams that might be considered out of the box, they hear Randy Arozarena and they're like, get that guy and let's pay that price. And they're trying to capitalize on those teams that kind of obsess over the idea of adding someone like Randy Arozarena. So definitely the earlier stages there. Wouldn't be comfortable kind of locking it down to a few teams. But, I know of a team in the NL and the AL, both of which who have called. And so kind of it's an evolving market. The same can be said for Glass now. When I was kind of given the teams that were in there, wrote them down in my notebook, and I asked the next day, and I had two more teams, and two of those were out. So, it's that's how these things work, especially with Tampa, always evolving, people in, out, one thing, then another. So, and they're monitoring this thing. They're going to try to be strategic in how they go about their process. And, they're going to make sure that if they're trading Randy Arozarena, they're capitalizing on the value.
Oh, yeah. Because you got to think, too, like, man, I guarantee they have sold jerseys with him. I got a bobblehead somewhere. I literally have a Randy Arozarena bobblehead somewhere. I don't know where I put it, but I got one because I went to Tropicana Field and they were giving him out. He's a very marketable player for them. So, like, to me, they're probably going to use that too when it comes to a deal. So we'll have to wait and see. However, there is a name out there. He's pretty good. I don't know if anyone knows about this player. He goes by the name of Juan Soto. He's pretty good. Not bad if you ask me. But your in-state rival, the Yankees, right? It looks like they're making some kind of a play for him. We've heard maybe a deal's not really close, but we've also heard that some names are being swapped back and forth, which I wouldn't say that's close, but that's got to be, in a decent stage if you're looking to acquire a player, I would think. There's a lot happening here with Juan Soto. We had Martino come out and say that the Padres, they're looking for certain players. They're looking for top prospects, top younger players as well. Names like Jason Dominguez have come up. Anthony Volpe have come up. I don't think Volpe's going anywhere. I don't see that. He's way too valuable to give up. Someone like Dominguez, I would also think is way too valuable, but I think, who knows, maybe. I wouldn't count it out necessarily, but I would probably lean more towards no. But we're starting to see some other names come up for Juan Soto where, you're looking at maybe someone like Clark Schmidt, a major league ready pitcher. We could see maybe some younger prospects like Will Warren, Chase Hampton getting close to major league ready. Maybe someone like Drew Thorpe as well. There's a lot of possibilities and names going back and forth for Juan Soto. Have you heard anything in particular about Juan Soto? What are your general thoughts on everything going on here?
Few things. First, kind of ask people who would know, what they're looking for, kind of how they're going about their process. First thing I was told, it's slow moving. They're going to make sure that they are thorough here. If you're trading Juan Soto, you better get back the right guys. We saw Juan Soto get dealt just a few years ago, and you look at the return and like they definitely got some players. You know, you're talking about guys like C.J. Abrams and a few others, but I would say the return is at least questionable. I think they want to make sure that if they're trading Juan Soto, and you look at Mookie Betts and how that package unfortunately worked out.
Yeah.
For the Red Sox, like if you are trading a star player, usually the star player, when you look at history, ends up being way more valuable than any of those pieces you get in return. They're trying to make sure that isn't the case. And so they've talked to the Yankees, that I know. What's interesting here is like you're thinking it's Juan Soto, like everyone's going to be involved and everyone wants him. Like it's not really the case. There's prospects that you have to give up. Like they want young pitching prospects, and not every team has that ready to go and are willing to trade that away. So that narrows it down to a really kind of smaller group of teams here that are going to be involved. But teams I would keep an eye out, like look at the outside of the box teams like the Seattle Mariners, who feel like they need a splash. They're
Yeah.
armed with pitching, right?
Yeah.
So I would say the Yankees have to be, a serious contender for Juan Soto. But if you're thinking about others, like look at teams that think outside of the box, they do bold things, and they have the young pitching prospects that would get a deal done. Those are the teams that are going to be in the sweepstakes here.
Oh yeah, for sure. You bring up the Mariners. Yeah, that'd be a heck of a fit, right? You can include Bryce Miller. You can do Brian Wu. You could do one of those guys and maybe throw in a couple more pieces, and then bing, bam, boom, you're done, right?
Right.
The thing that I look at when it comes to Soto is that team going to be a real? I know people say like you're going to get 1 year of Soto, but we saw this with Mookie, right? He went to the Dodgers, ended up signing long term. That's how I see it with Juan Soto personally, and that's why. To me, yes, I know the Yankees are kind of all the rage right now when it comes to when it comes to Juan Soto. But to me, I think a big reason for that is because the Yankees are the Yankees, one of the richest sports franchises in the entire world. They have money for days. Yes, they have been a bit more, I would say, people will probably scoff at this, but they're trying to be a bit more strategic with how they're spending their money, trying to be a bit more conservative in some ways. But to me, when I think of Juan Soto, who I think, he's a unicorn kind of a player, he could go down as one of the best players of all time. To me, pinstripes, Juan Soto, it just sounds right? It just sounds like something where it's like, yeah, could you go to the Mariners? But yeah, sure, you can do a trade. You can get something done. But is he going to stay there, right? And would the Mariners want to be giving up someone like Bryce Miller or Brian Wu, and then, Juan Soto is going to end up leaving. With the Yankees, I think the big thing is, one thing to keep in mind, they could bring him in. They could offer him the qualifying offer when he gets the free agency. And if he ends up leaving anyway, right? And the Mariners could do the same thing, right? So you'd get that pick. But I think for the Yankees, it would make some sense where you bring him in, right? And then see if he is a good fit, right, for the organization, right? See if he is a guy that can wear pinstripes for the rest of his career. I think with the Yankees, the advantage they have, obviously, is the money, but they can just get right to the table and be like, all right, let's not mess around. Let's get an extension done. Is that kind of the feeling that you get with the Yankees, and anything else that you're hearing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to view it here, it's a 1 year trial, right? And like you have this premium year, and people kind of scoff at the idea of like, it's 1 year of Juan Soto. Like every team would sign up for at least 1 year of Juan Soto.
Yeah.
Now, one thing they've been pretty adamant about is like he will hit the market. Like that is clear. Like he will be like he's Boris repped. Boris always encourages his players to hit the market. There's a 99% chance, maybe a little lower, that he is a free agent a year from now today. Like that's the likelihood here. But there is something to be said for like, if he goes to the Yankees, he has an MVP season and he's a superstar and he's loved in New York. Like that might make him more willing to stay in New York. It also might make the Yankees more willing to give more money than they otherwise would have, having had this one great year with him in the Bronx. And so that's where I think the landscape of like the teams interested in Juan Soto now and later are completely different. You talk about a team like the Mets. Like I have struggled to get the impression that they're really in here. If you ask me in a year, something tells me they are totally in.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has to do with they don't want to pay prospects for a guy that might only be there a year. And they know because he's Boris Rep that they'll have their shot in a year. And
Yeah.
so there's a balance here. You want to, there's, like I said, there's advantages to having him for that year. You get that one grace period where you could talk money with him, get a feel for where he's at. And if he loves New York, then boom, you get him, it's like an advantage on everyone else. But the drawback is might only be a year. And so that's what these teams are trying to navigate. Like, what's the risk, what's the reward, and what's the price? And that's kind of where they're at here.
Yeah, and I guess with me, again, I've been a Red Sox fan over 25 years. I've seen the Yankees make these moves. Like it just feels like something they would do, right?
It's
Many times they've come off, even go back to the ALCS in 04 when we made the comeback, right? They were one win away from a World Series. Yes, they dropped 4 straight, first team ever to do that. But they were still one win away from a World Series, and then they go out and they go get Randy Johnson, right? Sure, Randy Johnson ended up being not great with the Yankees, but still Randy Johnson, right? It was a huge trade. So I could see the Yankees doing this, and I wanted to ask you this too. And I know Scott Boras, there's a big thing with him wanting to take his players to the market, try to maximize the value. It makes sense. I definitely don't disagree with that. But do you think there is a chance? I mean, there's always a chance, right? But how much of a chance do you think if Juan Soto, let's say he goes to the Yankees, he puts those pinstripes on, give it, a few months, all-star break, he goes to Boras, says, hey, man, I really like it here. Like, I like the way these pinstripes look on me. I like how this organization is run. I want to be here for a long time. I know we probably haven't really heard anything like that. Obviously, we haven't got to that stage. But do you think, based off of anything maybe you've heard or just your personal feeling, gut feeling, do you think that is a possibility if he just tells Boras, who at the end of the day, Boras does work for Soto, that something like that could happen?
I mean, I think here's what I was told. Like, the Yankees impression, like, they're coming in thinking at the worst we have him for a year. And there is upside and a possibility that they have him, but they don't want to think like that. They want to put his value of a year of Juan Soto, because once you start paying for 3, 4, or 5 years of Juan Soto, right, that's when the price is exponentially different. But here's what I'll say there. Like, that's always a possibility.
Yeah.
And, I use the word encourage because we're also at the same time talking about a case where Pete Alonso, Boris Rep, is, he's being public about how he wants the Mets to give him the money and extend him. And so, if there is a willingness for him to stay there, and like, he's now been in Washington, he's been in San Diego, if he goes to the Yankees, he would be on the Yankees. Like, he knows what it's like to be on a winner. He knows what it's like to be in a great clubhouse, to be, with a great organization. He knows these things now at this point in his career. Yeah. And sure, who knows, maybe a few months into the season, he's really in his groove and the Yankees are winning games. And he says to Scott, hey, I love it here. And maybe we should talk to them and try to see what it would take to stay here. Yeah. That's totally a conversation that could be had. And that's the advantage of having this exclusive 1-year bargaining window where no one else can talk to him.
Yeah. Worst comes to worst. Hey, it gives you production for your team, good production, and maybe you make the playoffs. So who knows? We'll have to wait and see. We got one more story to talk about. I know the 550 people in this chat are waiting to talk about this story. But everyone, if you can, please go follow Michael on Twitter, Xland, whatever people like to call it these days. Go give him a follow. He's been doing great work. So, hey, keep it up again, my friend. You're doing great. But we got one more story. And we got a little story, nothing crazy. We got a little Shohei Ohtani. He's pretty good last time I checked. You put something out yesterday, and I actually just looked at the views. I didn't even notice 2 million views. That's not that bad if you ask me. But you got here among the teams I've confirmed are still in for Shohei Ohtani. We got the Dodgers, we got the Cubs, we got the Blue Jays, and the Angels are still in it. We had a couple other guys. I'm not sure if you are aware of who these people are, but we had a couple of other tweets put out here today. One from Brandon Panicar. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. who I'm not sure what he has or who he works for, but he's a sports management graduate. He's a Blue Jays fan. Who knows? I don't know. But this was floating around out there. Got over 400,000 views today. It appears the Shohei Ohtani market has come down to the Dodgers, Cubs, and Blue Jays. Unsure where the Angels are in all of this, but it is getting close to the decision. And then we had someone by the name of Gabriel Morency. He has a bit more of a background. He works in radio commentary with sports, I believe, in Toronto. I could be wrong about that, but I think that's where he is. He's done a lot of work with ESPN Radio, Amazon Prime, Roku. So with him, when it comes to the background, it seems like a bit more legitimate. But he is also kind of right along with what you had mentioned and what Brandon had mentioned too, saying the Cubs have made an offer. It is believed by many that it's down to the Dodgers and the Blue Jays, right? So it was a bit of a confusing tweet. I'm not sure if he's saying the Cubs are in it or if they've simply made an offer, but they're not really in it. Either way, the teams are lining up here among all three. I guess we just dive into it. What are you thinking here? What do you think?
Yeah, and I'll kind of run you through what I've heard. I'm definitely not comfortable at this point saying it's down to 2 or 3. I mean, I'm talking to people who have like as good of an understanding here as possible, and like they have not heard that it's down to 2 or 3 teams. Those 4 teams I mentioned, the Blue Jays, the Angels, the Dodgers, I'm blanking on one, Blue Jays, Angels, Dodgers, Cubs.
Cubs, yeah.
Those 4 teams, like they're in it. I've heard that they are still in it. And part of the reason here why you're not seeing a lot of information out there is Ohtani's camp told teams, like, if you leak what's going on, we will hold it against you, and the likelihood of him signing with your team will dramatically decrease. Like, if you talk to executives, like, they are scared to comment on Shohei Ohtani, like, for good reason.
Yeah.
And so there's just not a lot being said. Like, you really have to dig in terms of, like, the people to get, like, anything here at all. And so those 4 teams, like those are 4 teams I would watch. I wouldn't limit it to those 4 teams. Like, there's always sometimes teams that kind of come out of nowhere. Like, if you said the Cubs were going to get Craig Counsell a few months ago, people would have said you're crazy.
Right.
And then out of nowhere, it's like, whoa, the Cubs were in? Where did that come from?
Yeah, just went there out of nowhere.
Right? And like that had media coverage. Like there was a ton of media coverage there. Now you're talking about a guy who's pretty much threatened teams about like staying quiet. If there's a mystery team here that no one knows about, like no one has any idea. Yeah. And so that's why it's hard to talk in absolutes here,
sure,
especially with a guy like Shohei Ohtani. But what I'm comfortable saying is like those 4 teams I mentioned, like they are in, maybe to varying extents, but like those are 4 players who are legitimate players for Shohei Ohtani going forward.
And I will ask this, and I know it is hard to kind of talk about it because the lack of information that's out there, teams not wanting to say anything, but I keep just going back to this, right? I feel like, and he could end up just going back going to the Dodgers, right? Absolutely could end up going there. It feels like they've been linked forever. So absolutely, definitely a good chance he goes there. But the more I see the Dodgers, it just makes me think, God, is it just going to end up him not going to the Dodgers, right? Because I feel like we have seen this so many times in the past where I feel like if you see like that perfect fit so much that comes up, they just never go to that team. Sure, yeah, these players can, but I feel like there's so many times they just don't. Do you think the Dodgers, in your own personal opinion, do you think they have a leg up on these teams, or do you think it's a pretty even field right now? Based on your own
it's an even
feeling.
slate. It's an even slate. Like I do think there's a geographic preference for him to stay out west. It was something he put around the first time. Like I have no reason to believe it's changed. But you look back a few years ago when he came to the major leagues, and the Cubs were still on his list. So it's no shock that he's hitting the market, and they're in on him again. Like no one's surprised by that. They were the first time around, like they were the most east he was willing to go was the Cubs. So I'm not gonna say there's a favorite here or anyone has the inside lane. Like I think it's just there's not enough concrete. Like I was comfortable saying like those four teams, like they are definitely in on him. Like I
Hmm.
know for fact, but to say one of them is more in than any of the others is, I would be going out on a limb. Now, what I'll tell you is it's funny you said what you said because I was talking to someone who's as well respected as it gets in baseball. And I said, what's your take? Like, you think the Dodgers are just going to be the ones to land him? And he said, anytime everyone connects one player to one team, it never happens.
Yeah.
And so like, there's reason to take this with a grain of salt. Like, the Dodgers on paper feel like the greatest option. He doesn't have to move. They have the money. They saved it up for him. It's a great fit. But there's other interested suitors, and until we hear that like he's narrowed it down to the Dodgers, it's hard to, you know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
hard to say that. So you will just have to see how this plays out. But those are four teams. Like I would watch those four, not limited to those four, but those four as like serious players for Shohei Ohtani at this point.
Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, out of these four teams here, the one team that screams at me, that they just make so much noise when I see these four teams on my screen, the Angels. It's the boring answer. Everyone's going to be like, oh, like that one meme of the guy ripping off his headset, in disgust, basically. That's going to be the reaction among pretty much everyone if he goes back to the Angels. But we saw it with Aaron Judge last year, right? One phone call is sometimes all it takes, right? What do we got to do to keep you here, right? And when it comes to Ohtani, obviously the familiarity thing's a big thing with him. Himself and the culture that he grew up with, right? Respect is a big thing. Loyalty is a big thing. And I think he really values those things. But what I really do think at the end of the day, I think it's going to come down to he's going to be sitting down with whoever these people are at the table. There's going to be, probably a smorgasbord of foods laid out, scones, bagels, whatever, you name it, sushi, I don't know, pizza, who knows. But I think really what it's going to come down to is simply just what he hears, right? And what he simply just feels right with, right? And I think that's going to be, sure, we can talk the money, we can talk the competitiveness, we can talk about the farm system, we can talk about all those things, right? But I think it's really going to come down to, none of us are going to know that answer, is what feels right for him. Is that kind of the sense that you get with Ohtani, and maybe other things that you've heard?
I mean, it's impossible to predict really what to him is an intriguing factor. You look at it the first time around, like, who would have told you that the Angels were the perfect fit for Shohei Ohtani? Like, no one,
Yeah.
right? Like, he came to his own decision that the Angels were the fit for him. So, guessing about Shohei Ohtani's preferences would have been, wrong the first time. So, who's to say it would be any different the second time? Um, but I'm not going to rule out the Angels. I mean, he was happy in Anaheim. They didn't make the playoffs, they didn't win games, but they let him do his thing. He was able to hit and pitch just like they promised him, and there's no reason to believe that he has anything against that organization.
Yeah.
And it makes sense for them. I think an AirPod died. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. At least for them, like, I don't think he has anything against the organization and is still interested. And they're interested. Like, they want to look like they gave it all they had to get Shohei Ohtani
Yeah.
for good reason.
Yeah. And I think a big thing with Ohtani, too, I think a lot of people, I think MLB The Show has done a lot of things to people over the years, right? They just want to plug guys into certain teams, right? But with the Angels, I think what it comes down to, it's simply, with Ohtani, again, it's just that familiarity thing. And I think one thing that we need to think about, it's not what we think about the Angels, right? We can all sit here and, my potato self can sit at my desk and I can look at their roster and I can look at the prospects and, give my take on what I think about the Angels. It doesn't matter what I think about the Angels. It matters what Ohtani thinks. If he thinks that they can win, and if he thinks, sure, it hasn't happened, but it doesn't matter if he thinks they can. That keeps them in the game. To me, it really comes down to obviously what he's thinking, right?
Exactly.
And I guess I'll just end it there where I think it's really, and I'll ask you this, do you think it's more about those little things with Ohtani instead of the big things? Or do you think maybe it's a bit of both?
I mean, honestly, money's got to be a huge
Yeah, of
part here.
course.
Like,
Money's definitely going to be there.
right when you're talking about like 500 something million, like
Yeah.
600 and 500, like there's a delta there. And here's what I want to be, clear about. Like these are constantly evolving situations. Um, if it's happened before, and this is like I reported yesterday, the Rangers and the Red Sox, at least with the Rangers, like I heard they were out. Now you're hearing Ken Rosenthal saying like there's TV revenue problems there, and I kind of that was hinted to me in some extent when I originally reported it. If the Texas Rangers thought he's going for $600 million and they can't afford that with their revenue issues, and then you're about to sign the dotted line and it's 500, well, maybe they come back in it.
Yeah.
And the same can be said for the Red Sox, who I heard are currently looking up, elsewhere. They could be involved if that number doesn't amount to like what they thought, or if he indicates to them like I'm really intrigued with the idea of being on the Boston Red Sox. So, I think money is a big deal here.
Yeah.
But I also think like we've talked about like personal preference and like giving him this great pitch that you are the right spot for him. That will be paramount here, and like making sure you've got a great shot to land Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah, and I think another big thing, I think something that maybe people don't think about, it's what I'm just speculating, I'm just guessing, but I think it's also going to be something for him where it would seem to make sense, where he's going to be asking, all right, how are you guys going to manage my health for the next several years? He already knows it with the Angels, but I would imagine that's going to be something that comes up if he sits down with the Dodgers people, the Cubs, the Blue Jays, who, maybe some other sleeper teams in here. I would imagine that's going to be something that comes up in talks. But I also wonder too, and this is something that I have speculated about, is the structure of the contract. Do you think, based off your own gut feeling or maybe anything you've heard, that maybe the types of we already know the money's going to be there, but how the teams structure it, do you think that could be a big thing when it comes to Ohtani?
It's unclear kind of what the contractual demands are. Maybe some teams have reservations about how he won't be pitching this year. Maybe there's doubts about when he will pitch. If he's going to be a DH solely at some point in his career, it's hard to say, and that's kind of where team doctors will become involved here. But I wouldn't be shocked if, they load the contract financially speaking to when they believe he'll be the biggest contributor when you look at the stats and the data. And so maybe, the first year's low because you won't be able to pitch, but the second year, third year, fourth year are loaded. These are going to be things we'll find out when we start getting more concrete, information about really what he's looking for and kind of, like the finalists or like the teams he's really intrigued with. That's when this stuff will come out. But I wouldn't be shocked at all if it's tied to like, at least financially speaking, and maybe injuries. Like that's totally a part of it. You saw Kodai Senga, who signed a contract with the Mets last year, like there was a Tommy John surgery clause in there. And with Japanese players, like a lot of stress on their elbow, like they are cautious to make sure, there's some wear and tear there. And like they know that. And I'm sure there's going to be verbiage in the contract, at least maybe I would hope they take out insurance on a deal like this. But there's going to be verbiage in the contract that protects the team in some way if he was to get hurt. And so these are definitely all things that, and variables that will be kind of all a piece of the pie when they're trying to figure out the Shohei Ohtani situation.
Yeah, it's going to be a rather interesting couple of days. I'll ask one more question. Prediction: do you think he ends up signing in the next couple of days, or do you think this carries into the winter meetings?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not comfortable saying he would go before the winter meetings. It wouldn't shock me. I'll say that.
Yeah.
I would be shocked if it's after the winter meetings and we still don't have an answer on Shohei
Yeah.
Ohtani. Like,
Yeah, I agree.
I think we'll have some type of answer if you put me on the spot, like by the end of winter meetings is probably the latest.
I would think.
But who knows, right? Maybe like the money isn't lining up and they got to start letting this thing kind of linger on.
Yeah.
My guess is we'll have a clearer answer at the very latest, probably the end of the winter meetings or maybe shortly thereafter.
We'll have to wait and see. But Michael, man, it's been a pleasure. It's been amazing having you on the show today. I mean, we had a lot of great discussion here, a lot of great insight from you. Hey, I just want to say thank you for coming on, man. Is there anything else that you can give to the audience? Tell the audience, where can they find you? Obviously, we have your Twitter pulled up here. It's Marino MLB. Anywhere else, maybe anyone can find you?
I'm on Twitter. That's kind of my main platform at Marino MLB. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
Amen.
Let me try to see if I can empty my mental notebook. Just a few little things. I think Eduardo Rodriguez's, I've said it the past few days, like his timetable is said to be sooner than others, so I wouldn't be shocked if we kind of get an answer there. Yeah, I think the Mets are in to some extent, but I think the interest might be a little bit more serious at the moment elsewhere. Glass now is a pitcher to watch. I believe there's 7 teams in there. Cardinals are in. The Cubs are in. Like, there's several suitors that are in there to follow. You got any other last kind of send it my names? You shoot me some names, I'll tell you if I know anything. But figured, just kind of empty the notebook while I'm at it.
Give me. How about this? Let's let my giraffe Nick Robbie come on through. What do you got for my Red Sox, man? Give me something. Come on. Give me something.
They're in on Yamamoto. Like I know they're in. They like him. As I tweeted yesterday, like I have my doubts about how involved they are for Shohei Ohtani, or maybe their chances on Shohei Ohtani. I tweeted they're out or at least looking elsewhere. Like I had good reason to believe like they had their sights put on other pieces that are currently available.
Yeah.
At one point, I know they were talking about some type of Erod reunion. At least right now, it sounds like that's a little unlikely. But like they are looking for pitching for sure. I don't know. Like they could always circle back on Ohtani. I just think if you're asking me right now, like there's more serious suitors. And so I would say like for you, like pitching, I would keep an eye on the pitching market. Like they are a team that's looking to add starters.
Yeah, and like I said, I've been a Red Sox fan for years now. I could see them putting themselves in the Ohtani market for sure because, there is that New Balance thing, where the headquarters are there. Obviously, they're coming off a couple of tough seasons here. They got to make some kind of a splash, but it doesn't feel like he's the right guy for them. I think it's more if he fell into their lap kind of a thing. That's how I could see it happening.
Totally.
I never saw that really coming to fruition. But that's just me. But we do have a few super chats before you do get out of here. We actually got a super chat from Wardy a little earlier, Mr. Wardy. Everyone, Wardy NYM on YouTube. Great Mets channel. $1.99. He says, congrats on landing the legend himself, Mr. Marino. Hey, Wardy, whenever Wardy gives you his vouch, definitely means something. So thank you, Wardy.
I appreciate it, Wardy.
Yeah, man. And we got a couple from about the Cardinals. We got Jack Strickland, $1.99. He's asking, anything on St. Louis? Anything on St. Louis?
Involved in pitching. Trade market is where their sights are. They've looked at Cease. They've looked at Glass now. I kind of spoke a little bit earlier. Like, I think Matz could be a potential piece in a deal. There's some things I can't really talk about, but like they're looking at pitching. They've talked names with at least one team who's dealing a pitcher and are seen as like at least serious candidates to land one of those pitchers on the trade market. So that's what I'll give you there.
Sounds good to me. And Connor Gray, also another Cardinals fan here on the channel, he says, as a Cardinals fan, I want Ohtani, but Cease would be thumbs up. Yeah, I don't see the Cardinals getting Ohtani. Cease definitely sounds more realistic. We have, I love this name that pops up on my channel sometimes, the Lonely Wolf who howls alone at the moon. $2 super chat. Any word on Teoscar Hernandez? He asks.
That's a great question, and I've asked about him. Like, I have struggled to get a read on his market. A team like the Mets, like in my mind, makes sense.
Yeah.
They were close to landing Manuel Margot a few weeks ago, alongside the Yankees, who were also in.
Yep.
I'll give you a few other names for the Mets to follow, like Kevin Kiermaier, Justin Turner, who Stearns has always kind of had his. Like, he's always been a fan of Justin Turner. Almost acquired him a few years ago, which I think isn't really public, but like always liked Justin Turner. So those are like the few guys, like under the radar guys, that I would keep an eye out on for the Mets at least. But I don't have teams yet on Teoscar Hernandez. But my personal analysis is he's a great player who I think will have a great bounce back year. Like, I love his bat. Like, I know maybe, the full scape of the season didn't go as well as he had hoped.
Yeah.
I wouldn't expect, like, I'm expecting him to bounce back next year.
Sounds good to me. Oh, we just had another one come in. Patman0074, $2. He says, hey, Mike, any thoughts on the Padres and Jung-Hoo Lee? That's another name that's out there.
Yeah, I mean, and I honestly, any time I'm talking to San Diego, it's about a guy named Juan Soto right now. So I don't really have a great answer there. If I'm being transparent with you, I think everyone's focus is on Juan Soto in San Diego.
Yeah.
I think when that kind of boils over, you'll start to get answers, in terms of who else they're interested in, because I don't think it's just going to be a sell. Like, they're going to need guys, on that 40-man to replace the guy, like Juan Soto and potentially others. So, like, I'm focused on Juan Soto with San Diego. But, like, it's a great person to mention. Like, he's a fit for what they're looking to try to do.
Yeah, Jung-Hoo Lee, I think, is a really interesting name because he's kind of that fallback option, right? Obviously Cody Bellinger is a name out there, and if the team doesn't get Bellinger, or if they want to go the cheaper route, you can go after someone like Jung-Hoo Lee. He will have, he's going to be more of that contact kind of a bat, so we'll see, but I think that could be a decent fit. I think, even for the Yankees in some ways, I think that could be a pretty decent fit. Maybe the Twins, we'll have to see on him. But yeah, I think he's a really interesting player. Speaking of Bellinger, I will ask this. One team that I've connected Bellinger to coming into the offseason, I predicted him going to the Giants. I also predicted Matt Chapman to go to the Giants. I've kind of looked at the Giants the last couple of years where they try to just go for the big fish, right? They're always just going for that top echelon guy, which I don't blame them for, sure. But I almost kind of looked at the Giants, with they obviously have some money to throw around. But I kind of thought coming into this offseason, let's kind of just spread the wealth a little bit instead of trying to just land the big fish. Yes, try to land the big fish, but don't put all your eggs in one basket. What are you thinking about the Giants? Because we've been seeing reports about them really looking to make some splashes. Have you heard anything about the Giants?
No, they're a team I was told to watch for Cody Bellinger. So it's a great link that you just had. What's interesting is, like, I've been trying to get a pulse on where they're at with Ohtani, and I haven't heard no or yes. Like, it's very unknown how they are. So,
that's
like,
scary.
Maybe they're a team, right? Like, we would have no idea. So they're a team to watch. Like, they're a team to watch for him, potentially Chapman as well. But Bellinger, like, I asked around initially, like, give me team links, like, link these players to whatever teams. And, like, one of them was, like, I think Cody Bellinger to the Giants is just, like, a fit. And, like, It makes a lot of sense. There's mutual interest. I'm not comfortable saying, like, oh, they're favorites, or like I don't have a full scope of his market, but I do know the Giants are at least one team in on the mix there for Cody Bellinger.
Yeah, the Giants are going to be really interesting. I think it's funny because we've seen the reports where, with Otani's camp, if anything gets leaked out, I think specifically it said meetings. I'm not sure if it expanded into just simply names of the teams getting out there that could be finalists. I'm not sure the extent.
Sure.
But if you were to say if these 4 teams are getting listed and the Giants you haven't heard a thing about the Giants.
Right.
Oh, that'd be interesting. So maybe these teams
sure
get
would.
disqualified and the Giants, they win by default because they didn't let anything get out. I don't know.
Exactly.
I'm just kidding. But
that's their hope. That's their hope.
I honestly, if that is what is happening with the Giants, good on them. The fact that they're not letting anything get out there, I don't know.
No, and I've tried. Like I got stuff back on Bellinger. Chapman, I think, is linked as like a possible fit. But I got nothing back on Ohtani there.
Yeah, they're keeping it because they, after all the swing and misses that they've had, and they know if they can't let anything get out there, like they are not saying a word. They're probably keeping it with Zarhan, honestly. He's not telling anyone. So
exactly.
We'll see. But I do think the Giants do make some moves. I saw someone in the chat asking about that. San Francisco Giants Soul in the chat was asking. We have a couple more super chats. The Lonely Wolf asks once again. I feel like the Braves can get Imanaga. That's another name that's been coming up here. I'm sure maybe you've heard a couple of interesting things about him, but he seems to be the fallback after Yamamoto, I'm guessing.
Exactly. And yeah. I've heard the Mets are a team to watch there. Don't have a full scope of his market. I think people are really primarily focused on Yamamoto, but he's a great fallback option. Yeah. When you're talking about how, Erod might go soon, Jordan Montgomery is a guy that I know the Mets have shown a ton of interest in. So, these guys are going to start to go off the board, and the teams that still need pitchers and have these barren rotations and they just need guys like these are like guys like him are great options for them, where high upside plays where you might have something better than you could even imagine. Right, Kodai Senga worked out great for the Mets, and we're talking about similar money there.
Yeah.
So, these are options for teams who might miss out on some of the bigger names, but still want to land a starter.
Yeah, that all sounds about right. With Imanaga, the one thing about Imanaga, I don't know if you've heard this or not from any organizations, but the one thing that seems to be a bit glaring with him were the home runs allowed over in Japan, which it's usually not a very high number, at least with the good pitchers. With him, he was giving up about a home run per 9, which over here, that's acceptable. That's fine.
Right.
But according to research out there, that number tends to double when you get to Major League Baseball, right? Has there been any word on that? Is that something you can confirm?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's something that they're monitoring, right? All these teams kind of have their internal projections on how these guys will translate over. There's a reason he's not getting as much buzz as Yamamoto, and it's because he's probably not as good. And so, he's a valuable asset, but he's just not Yamamoto. And that's why you're seeing Yamamoto get all the buzz.
Sure.
And so, he's a guy that teams are watching. I know the Mets have talked about internally, like, they like the scope of international pitchers this year. Like, they really do. And so that's why they're in on those guys, and I'm sure others are too. I don't have kind of that full list of teams there for you. But I mean, I'm sure it's something, obviously, like their atmospheric conditions, like because it's a dome, that plays a role in kind of how the ball flies.
Yeah.
And if it's flying in that, then it's, like that's
for sure.
Point in case.
Yeah, and with Imanaga, I think what can cancel that out is he has just such an array of pitches, right? He's got so many different things that he throws, and I could see teams being like, we can work on that home run ball, not a big deal, right? He's got such a repertoire where I think that could cancel it out. We have another super chat here, Connor Gray once again. Connor, thank you. This is an interesting idea. I tend to think this usually doesn't happen. Usually teams like to maximize values of each player, but he asks, could you package Tyler Glasnow and Randy Arozarena together in a trade? He says specifically St. Louis, but I'll just ask, could they? Do you think there's even a possibility they get to put together?
Correct me if I'm wrong. Randy Arozarena, originally a Cardinal, right? Traded to
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So just interesting note there. I don't think they're going to combine them. And it's funny because we kind of saw something similar play out a few years back at the deadline with the Cubs.
Yeah.
They were trading Chris Bryant. They were trading Javi Baez. They were trading Craig Kimbrell.
Mm-hmm.
And they were trading Anthony Rizzo.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, hey, should we package some of these guys? It's
Yeah.
something that was floated around. At the time, the Mets talked about all different types of packages, some of which would land Chris Bryant and Kimbrell and Wilson Contreras. And so now looking back, they had all these possibilities where they could have gotten a huge package. Instead, they just get Javi Baez. Chris Bryant goes to the Giants. Anthony Rizzo goes to the Yankees.
Yeah.
And so, usually what GMs will tell you is like when you package them, you limit your suitors here.
Yeah.
And that's where it's difficult. Like time over time again, when you've got a bunch of controllable assets that have value, you are going to want to make sure you get the absolute most for each and every one of them. Yeah. And usually when you combine them into one package, that limits the value you're going to get back. So my guess is no, but I'm sure it's, teams that are looking to go all out. What's the cost for both of them? I'm sure it's a question that comes up.
I'll ask you this, and since you brought up Anthony Rizzo, one idea that I have floated, and it was actually something that was reported. I can't remember who exactly. I hate not giving the credit. I feel like maybe Rosenthal said it. I could be wrong. But when it came to the Juan Soto rumors, especially with the Yankees, one name that did come up with it was Anthony Rizzo, where right now he is a bit of an underwater contract, had a down year last year. I believe his AAV... I think it's like 15. I can't remember I think it's around that number, maybe like 15, 20. Can't fully remember. But either way, his contract, he's a little underwater right now on that contract. Is that someone that you think where if the Yankees are sending back a package to the Padres and the Padres are just trying to milk as many prospects, or major league ready players as they can, or young major league players, someone like Rizzo could be included to maybe decrease the overall value of the package to maybe squeeze in like an extra prospect, like a Will Warren, maybe even a Drew Thorpe. Is there anything like that come up in any of your reports?
My guess is not. And the only reason why I'm saying that is like a huge part of their unwillingness to hold on to Soto is their cash flow issues. Like they are adamant that if we are trading Juan Soto, we want young prospects back.
Yeah.
I don't think they want potential baggage, what could be seen as maybe a negative contract added in return. Like they shouldn't need to take on a bad contract if they're dealing Juan Soto. Sure. And so that's where I think like they're just trying to capitalize with prospect value.
Yeah, that's kind of the, I've floated out that idea many times, and I just thought, well, sure, you'd have to take on some salary there, but it wouldn't be the Juan Soto projected $33 million for next year. But I thought, if you take on Rizzo, maybe the Yankees pay a little of it, something, I don't know, work out something there. I thought, maybe you could squeeze out another prospect in there. But that's kind of the way I sort of see it too, where, probably not. But, all righty. Well, I think that's it for tonight, everyone. I think that's it. I want to thank you all for the late super chats that were brought in. Michael, again, I just want to thank you so much for coming on here. So it's always a pleasure having a guest, but to have someone where you've been really, you've been working your tail off out there, really just trying to get the scoop. And, hey, I appreciate you bringing that on to the show, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. Everyone, we're going to get out of here. Thank you so much. I will be going on Ballcap Sports in a little bit. I'll be talking with Jim. We actually have an announcement to make over there. We're going to be announcing it together, so look out for that stream in just a little bit. Head on over to Ballcap Sports and come watch us over there. We'll be talking just some good old baseball talk. But Michael, man, thank you so much. Always greatly appreciated to have you on, my friend. And I'm sure we will come back together at some point, maybe to talk some more rumors. So,
thank you so much, man, for having me on.
All right, man. Thank you so much, and I'll be right back with you. Stay where you are. But everyone, I want to thank you for coming out to tonight. Always a pleasure having all of you come out. It's always great to see all of the friendly faces in the chat. Thank you to all the super chats and everyone that just chimed into the conversation. If you can, on the way out, hit that like button for me. The goal was 200 for tonight. We ended up getting to 200, so thank you so much for that. We got to 250. If you can help us get to 300 likes on the way out, I will love you forever. Hit the bell, share the show, subscribe if you are new. Everyone, thank you so much for coming out tonight, and we will be back probably tomorrow, maybe. I'm guessing there could be something tomorrow. It is a Friday. I usually don't go live on Fridays, but I'm sure tomorrow, with things that we have been hearing, maybe we could end up seeing something tomorrow. So, everyone, have yourself a great night. Head on over to Ballcap Sports in just a little bit. I'll be heading over there. So, everyone, have yourself a great night, and I'll talk to you next time.